Baltic Mythology. Published by Wikipedia. Baltic mythology is the body of mythology of the Baltic peoples stemming from Baltic paganism and continuing after Christianization and into Baltic folklore. History. Baltic mythology ultimately stems from Proto-Indo-European mythology. The Baltic region was one of the last regions of Europe to be Christianized, a process that began in the 15th century and continued for at least a century afterward. While no native texts survive detailing the mythology of the Baltic peoples during the pagan period, knowledge of such beliefs may be gained from Roman and German chronicles, from later folklore, from etymology and from the reconstructions of comparative mythology. While the early chronicles were largely the product of missionaries who sought to eradicate the native paganism of the Baltic peoples, rich material survives into Baltic folklore. This material has been of particular value in Indo-European studies as, like the Baltic languages, it is considered by scholars to be notably conservative, reflecting elements of Proto-Indo-European religion. The Indo-European divine twins are particularly well represented as the Dieva Deli and Dievo Sinelii. According to folklore, they are the children of Dievas. Associated with the brothers and their father are two goddesses, the personified sun, Sol and Sol's Maida. Lithuanian mythology. Published by Wikipedia. Lithuanian mythology is the mythology of Lithuanian polytheism, the religion of pre-Christian Lithuanians. Like other Indo-Europeans, ancient Lithuanians maintained a polytheistic mythology and religious structure. In pre-Christian Lithuania, mythology was a part of polytheistic religion. After Christianization, mythology survived mostly in folklore, customs, and festive rituals. Lithuanian mythology is very close to the mythology of other Baltic nations, such as Prussians and Latvians, and is considered a part of Baltic mythology. The pantheon of Lithuania was formed during thousands of years by merging pre-Indo-European and Indo-European traditions. Feminine gods such as Zemina are attributed to pre-Indo-European tradition, whereas the expressive thunder god Perkunas is considered to derive from Indo-European religion. The hierarchy of the gods depended also on social strata of ancient Lithuanian society. Dievas, also called Dievas Senelis, Dangaus Dievas, the supreme sky god. It is descended from Proto-Indo-European *dievos, celestial, or shining, from the same root as *dias, the reconstructed chief god of the Proto-Indo-European pantheon. It relates to ancient Greek Zeus, Latin Dies Phidias, Luvian Tiwat, German Tawaz. The name Dievas is being used in Christianity as the name of God. Andagius is mentioned in chronicles as the most powerful and highest god of Lithuanians. Lithuanians cried its name in a battle. It might just be an epithet of the supreme god, Dievas. Perkunas, god of thunder, also synonymically called Dundalis, Brusgulis, Divitus, Grumutus etc. It closely relates to other thunder gods in many Indo-European mythologies: Vedic Paryanya, Celtic Tyrannus, Germanic Thor, Slavic Perun. The Finnic and Mordvin, Urza thunder god named Persianpaz shows in folklore themes that resemble the imagery of Lithuanian Perkunas. Perkunas is the assistant and executor of Dievas' will. He is also associated with the oak tree. Dievo Sinelii, Asvenii, pulling the carriage of Sol through the sky. Like the Greek Dioscuri Castor and Pollux, it is a mytheme of the divine twins common to the Indo-European mythology. Two well-accepted descendants of the divine twins, the Vedic Asvins and the Lithuanian Asvenii, are linguistic cognates ultimately deriving from the Proto-Indo-European word for the horse, H1 Aquos. They are related to Sanskrit Asva and Avestan Aspa, and to Old Lithuanian Asva, all sharing the meaning of mare. Velnyas, chthonic god of the underworld, related to the cult of dead. The root of the word is the same as of Lithuanian, vele. After the introduction of Christianity, it was equated with evil, and Velnyas became the Lithuanian name for devil. In some tales, Velnyas was the first owner of fire. God sent a swallow, which managed to steal the fire. Zemina is the goddess of the earth. It relates to Thracian Zemel, Greek Semele. She is usually regarded as mother goddess and one of the chief Lithuanian gods. Zemina personifies the fertile earth and nourishes all life on earth, human, plant, and animal. The goddess is said to be married to either Perkunas or Promzius. Thus the couple formed the typical Indo-European pair of Mother Earth and Father Sky. It was believed that each spring, the earth needs to be impregnated by Perkunas, the heavens rain and thunder. Perkunas unlocks the earth. It was prohibited to plow or sow before the first thunder, as the earth would be barren. Zverine is the goddess of hunting and forest animals. Medeina is the name in other sources. Medeina, the goddess of forest and hunting. Researchers suggests that she and Zverine could have been worshipped as the same goddess. Zimpates, god of the land, harvest, property, and homestead. Martinus Masvidus, in 1547, in his Catechism, urged to abandon cult of Zimpates. Zvigsdikis, the god of the stars, powerful god of light, who provided light for the crops, grass, and the animals. It was also known as Sveiksdikas by Yatvinjans. Gabija is the spirit or goddess of the fire. She is the protector of the family fireplace and family. Her name is derived from Lithuanian, gobti, to cover, to protect. Nobody was allowed to step on firewood, since it was considered a food for the fire goddess. Even today, there is a tradition of weddings in Lithuania to light a new symbolic family fireplace from the parents of the newlyweds. Lema or Lame is the destiny giver goddess. Bongpudis, god of the sea, wind, waves and storm. Was worshipped by fishermen and seamen. Taliavelis, Kalavelis, a smith god or the god of roads. First mentioned in a 1262 copy of Chronographia of John Malalas as Teliavel. Lithuanian linguist Kazimieras Buga reconstructed a previous form, Kalvelis. Taliavelis, Kalavelis freed Saul from the dark using his iron hammer. In Lithuanian fairy tales recorded much later, there is very frequent opposition of Kalvis and Velnias. Historiography. Pre-Christian Lithuanian mythology is known mainly through attested fragments recorded by chroniclers and folk songs. The existence of some mythological elements, known from later sources, has been confirmed by archaeological findings. The system of polytheistic beliefs is reflected in Lithuanian tales, such as Jurid and Kastytis, Egil the Queen of Serpents, and the myth of Sovi. The next period of Lithuanian mythology started in the 15th century and lasted until approximately the middle of the 17th century. The myths of this period are mostly heroic, concerning the founding of the state of Lithuania. Perhaps two of the best-known stories are those of the dream of the Grand Duke Gediminas and the founding of Vilnius, the capital of Lithuania, and of Šventaragės Valley, which also concerns the history of Vilnius. Many stories of this kind reflect actual historical events. Already, by the 16th century, there existed a non-unified pantheon. Data from different sources did not correspond one with another, and local spirits, especially those of the economic field, became mixed up with more general gods and ascended to the level of gods. The third period began with the growing influence of Christianity and the activity of the Jesuits, roughly since the end of the 16th century. The earlier confrontational approach to the pre-Christian Lithuanian heritage among common people was abandoned, and attempts were made to use popular beliefs in missionary activities. This also led to the inclusion of Christian elements in mythic stories. The last period of Lithuanian mythology began in the 19th century, when the importance of the old cultural heritage was admitted, not only by the upper classes, but by the nation more widely. The mythical stories of this period are mostly reflections of the earlier myths, considered not as being true, but as the encoded experiences of the past. Elements and nature. Stories, songs, and legends of this kind describe laws of nature and such natural processes as the change of seasons of the year, their connections with each other and with the existence of human beings. Nature is often described in terms of the human family. In one central example, the sun is called the mother, the moon the father, and stars the sisters of human beings. Lithuanian mythology is rich in gods and minor gods of water, sky and earth. Holy groves were worshipped, especially beautiful and distinctive places. Alka were selected for sacrifices for gods. Fire. Fire is very often mentioned by chroniclers, when they were describing Lithuanian rituals. Algirdas, Grand Duke of Lithuania, was even addressed as a fire worshipper king of Lithuania, in the documents of a patriarch Nilus of Constantinople. Water. Water was considered a primary element. Legends describing the creation of the world usually state that, at first there was nothing but water. Springs were worshipped, they were considered holy. The river was seen as separating the areas of life and death. If the settlement was placed at the river, then the deceased were buried in another side of the river. Water sources were highly respected, and it was tradition to keep any water, spring, well, river, lake clean. Cleanliness was associated with holiness. Sacred groves. Sacred groves were considered holy, not in themselves, but as homes of the gods. Jerome of Prague was an ardent missionary in Lithuania, zealous in supervising the felling of sacred groves and the desecration of other pagan holy places. Lithuanian women reach Vytautas the Great with plaints that they are losing their places of dievas, the places where they prayed to the supreme god, dievas to withhold the sun or rain. Now, when the holy groves are destroyed, they do not know where to search for dievas since it lost its home. Jerome of Prague was finally sent out of the country. Celestial bodies. Celestial bodies, planets were seen as a family. Manulus married Sol and they had 7 daughters, Osrine, Vicarine, Indraha, Vavora or son Pazarines in some versions, Zeesdre, Selija, and Zeme. 3 daughters lived close to their mother Sol, another 3 were traveling. Grizulo Ratai was imagined as a carriage for the sun which was traveling through the sky, Mazigi Grizulo Ratai, a carriage for the daughter of sun. Zodiac or astrological signs were known as liberators of the Sol from the tower in which it was locked by the powerful king, the legend recorded by Jerome of Prague in 14th–15th century. Myths and legends. Legends and myths are short stories explaining the local names, appearance of the lakes and rivers, other notable places like mounds or big stones. The tale of Sovi. The myth of god Smith Teliavelis freeing the sun. The cosmogonic myths of celestial bodies, Osrine, Sol and Manulus, Grizulo Ratai, also known as the celestial marriage drama. The 9-point deer, the deer which carries the sky with planets on its antler. Egil the queen of serpents. Jurid and Castitus. The tale of priestess Birud and Grand Duke Kestutis. Iron Wolf, the legend about founding of Vilnius. Polemonids, the legend of origin of Lithuanians. Published by Wikipedia. Sovi is a character in a Baltic myth recorded in the Russian translation of chronography by the Byzantine chronicler John Malalas. According to the myth, Sovi was the instigator of the ancient Baltic tradition of burning the deceased and the subsequent rituals of sacrifice for the Baltic gods of Andages, Perkunas, Zavorun, and Teliavelis. His other purpose was also the escort of dead souls to the underworld, akin to the ancient Egyptian Anubis and ancient Greek Charon. Name of Sovi. The origin and meaning of the Sovi name are disputed. For example, Eduards Wolters, a linguist, ethnographer, and archaeologist of the Baltic languages and culture states that it's a borrowed word from Arabic, while philologist Antony Julian Mierzyński states that it originates from the name of a Lithuanian tribe. But the majority of etymologists think that it originates from the Indo-European root sau, meaning sun. Myth of Sovi. The myth revolves around the 3 main ways of burial: ground burial, hanging in a tree, and burning. Sovi, after successfully hunting down a boar, gave 9 of its spleens to his children to cook. Instead of cooking them, the children ate the spleens. Infuriated, Sovi traveled to hell. After making it through 8 gates, he required assistance from one of his sons to enter through the 9th. After the remaining brothers were discontent with the son's decision to help his father Sovi, he promised to take him back for burial. After dining with his father, he took him to sleep, to bury, in the ground, while the next day he took him to sleep up a tree. Sovi was discontent with both methods of burial until he was burned in a fire, remarking that he slept like a toddler in a cradle. Sovi also is mentioned to have led souls in hell to worship the aforementioned gods. Egil the Queen of Serpents. Published by Wikipedia. Egil the Queen of Serpents, alternatively Egil the Queen of Grass Snakes, is a Lithuanian folktale, first published by M. Jasevich in 1837. Egil the Queen of Serpents is one of the best-known Lithuanian folktales, with many references to Baltic mythology. Over 100 slightly diverging versions of the plot have been collected. Its mythological background has been an interest of Lithuanian and foreign researchers of Indo-European mythology. Gintaras Beresnevičius considered it being a Lithuanian theogonic myth. The tale features not only human reptile shapeshifting, but irreversible human tree shapeshifting as well. Numerology is also evident in the tale, such as 12 sons, 3 daughters, 3 days, 3 tricks, 3 weeks of feast, 9 years under the oath of marriage, 3 tasks given to Egil by her husband to fulfill and 9 days of visits. Published sources. The tale first appeared in print in 1837, published by M. Yusevicius in the literary collection Baruta in Vilnius. The tale was also collected by Polish writer Józef Ignacy Kraszewski and published in his historical work Litwa. Etymology. Egil is a popular female name in Lithuania. It is also a noun meaning tree species spruce and fir, with cognates in other Baltic languages. Latvian Egil, spruce, fir, and Old Prussian Adel, spruce, fir. One of the main characters in this fairy tale is a grass snake, but because it seems to inhabit the sea-adjacent lagoon, the word may actually refer either to a mythical aquatic snake or a European eel. Synopsis. The story can be subdivided into a number of sections, each having parallels with motifs of other folktales, yet a combination of them is unique. A young maiden named Egil discovers a grass snake coiled around the sleeve of her blouse after bathing in a lake with her 2 sisters. The grass snake demands that Egil pledge herself to him for the return of her clothing. Egil relents and agrees to marry. Faked brides. After 3 days, thousands of grass snakes arrive at her parents' house. In one version, the parents yield their daughter right away, frightened by the teeming serpents. In other embellished versions, the parents trick the serpents by giving up substitutes 3, sometimes 4 times. A domesticated goose, a sheep and then a cow, then her oldest sister. However, each time the serpents slither away with one these brides, they are alerted by the cuckoo to the trick being played upon them. The enraged grass snakes return one final time and threaten a calamity such as burning down the parents' house, a crop-killing drought, or a famine. Afraid of misfortune, the parents surrender the real bride, Egil, and give her away to the serpent king of the sea. To the sea palace. At the seashore, Egil is welcomed by a handsome man, who identifies himself as Zilvinas, the snake from earlier. Zilvinas the grass snake prince takes her to his palace under the sea, via a route starting from a nearby island and entering an underground tunnel. Egil bears 4 children, 3 sons, Azwolas, Uasis and Berzas, and 1 youngest daughter Drebule. They live happily for 9 years and Egil nearly forgets her homeland until being questioned by her oldest son Azwolas about her parents. Upon remembering her life before, she becomes homesick and begs her husband Zilvinas to let her visit her family above ground. However, Zilvinas denies her permission to visit her hometown, unless Egil can fulfill 3 impossible tasks. 3 difficult tasks. The 3 tasks are: spinning into thread and never diminishing, enchanted toe of silk, wearing down a pair of iron shoes, and baking a cake without vessels or utensils. With advice from a sorceress, she succeeds in completing these 3 tasks. Throwing the clump of silk into the fire causes the appearance of the toad living in the foundations of the building, which was the original provider of the silken toe. The enchantment having been revoked by the magical toad, the heroine is finally able to complete the spinning task. The iron clogs she takes to a blacksmith to have them annealed, thus softening them so they will wear down. Placing leaven on the sieve turned it into a makeshift liquid holder. Murder of the king. With the tasks completed, Zilvinas reluctantly lets Egil and the children go. Prior to their departure, he instructs them how to call him from the depths of the sea and asks not to tell this secret to anyone else. After meeting the long-lost family member, Egil's relatives do not wish to let her return to the sea and decide to kill Zilvinas. First, his sons are threatened and beaten with the scourge by their uncles, in attempt to make them disclose how to summon their father. However, they remain silent and do not betray him. Finally, a frightened daughter reveals the summoning chant. Zilvinas, dear Zilvanellis. If alive, may the sea foam milk. If dead, may the sea foam blood. When the serpent king Zilvinas arrives from the sea, all 12 brothers of Egil take the scythe and cut him into pieces. They do not say a word to their sister about the horrible crime. After 9 days, Egil arrives at the seashore and calls her husband, but unfortunately only the foam of blood returns from the sea. When Egil hears her dead husband's voice and discovers how her beloved has died, as a punishment for betrayal she whispers an enchantment, which turns her fragile, fearful daughter into a quaking aspen. She then turns her sons into sturdy trees, an oak, an ash and a birch. Finally, Egil herself turns into a spruce. The names of the characters reflect the type of trees they turn into. Egil means spruce or fir. Her sons is Wolas, Burzas, Uasis, and the daughter Drebule. Jurid and Castitus. Published by Wikipedia. Jurid and Castitus is one of the most famous and popular Lithuanian legends and tales. The first time it was recorded was in 1842, in the writings of Liudvikas Adomas Juchevičius. Since then it has been adapted many times for modern poems, ballets, and even rock operas. Since the heroine does not appear in Lithuanian mythology, the tale is likely of literary romantic origin. Etymology. The heroine's name, Jurid, is related to words for sea in Baltic languages, namely, Lithuanian Jura, sea, and Latvian Jura, Jura, sea, great mass of water. Synopsis. The plot greatly varies between the different versions. However, the basic facts remain the same. The goddess Jurid lived under the Baltic Sea in a beautiful amber castle. A young fisherman named Castitus was fishing and she fell in love with the handsome young fisherman. They spent happy times in the castle, but the thunder god, Perkunas, found out that the goddess had fallen in love with Castitus, a mortal man. He became furious and struck the amber castle. It exploded into millions of pieces. According to legend, that is why pieces of amber come ashore after a storm on the Baltic Sea. Jurid rescued Castitus from drowning in a storm. According to other variations, Castitus was killed by Perkunas and Jurid mourns him to this day. Her teardrops are amber pieces washed ashore and one could hear her sad voice in a stormy sea. Sometimes it is said that Castitus is from Sventoji, north of Palanga. Other tales. Other stories of the Baltic Sea region also show characters and locations associated with an underwater palace, a watery domain and the amber gemstone. In a Latvian fairy tale, Bulbulus the bird, 3 princes set out on a quest for the magical bird Bulbulus, but only the youngest succeeds. Seething with envy and jealousy, the older brothers cast the youngest into the sea and take the bird for themselves. However, the hero is saved by the Sea Queen and taken to her amber castle. In a Polish fairy tale, the water-dwelling maidens with amber-colored hair live with their father, the Amber King, in a palace at the bottom of the sea. List of Lithuanian gods and mythological figures. Published by Wikipedia. The list of Lithuanian gods is based on scarce written sources and late folklore. Many of them were outright invented. Lithuania converted to Christianity in 1387, but elements of Lithuanian mythology survived into the 19th century. The earliest written sources, authored by foreigners and Christians, only briefly mention the Lithuanian gods. Beginning in the 16th century, the pagan religion received more attention from authors, but often their accounts were confused, contradictory, and heavily influenced by various religious agendas. Collection and recording of folklore began in the 19th century, by which time the pagan mythology had become fragmented and mixed with Christian traditions. The cults of old deities transformed into folklore without associated rituals. Because of such difficulties in obtaining data, there is no accepted list of Lithuanian gods. Different authors present wildly contradictory reconstructions of the Lithuanian pantheon. Names from folklore myths and legends. This section includes the names of gods, divine or demonic beings, and other personages from Lithuanian myths, legends, folklore, and fairy tales. Gods and goddesses. Asvinii, the divine twins who pulled the chariot of the sun. Osrine, the morning star, a goddess, a daughter of the god. She was the goddess of the morning. Alternatively, her name is given as Asra. Ushas in Vedic Hinduism. Osteras, the god of the northeast wind, who stands at the gates of paradise and lights the way for those going to paradise. His function of shining this beacon makes him similar to Osrine. Some consider him to be her cousin. Bongpudis, the god of the seas and storms. He is two-faced like the Roman god Janus. Dahlia, goddess of fate and weaving. Deivs Valditojos were the goddesses who made garments from humans' lives. They were 7 sisters: Verpyanchoji, Medinchoji, Adeha, Gadintoya, Sergitoya, Nukerpeya, and Iskalbeya. They have similarities with the Greek Fates and the Norse Norns. Deivs Valditojos were associated with Dahlia and Lema. Dievas, the supreme deity. Dievas Senelis, a teacher of people and judge of their morality. He looks like an old traveling beggar. Dievas Senelis is proficient at magic and medicine. Epithet of Dievas. Gabija, the foster of the holy fire, a goddess, a daughter of Dievas. Lema, goddess of fate and pregnant women. Menuo, the moon, a son of Dievas. Perkunas, the thunder, the main god. Promzius, Promzes, Promsons, Promzimas, an epithet of Dievas, probably of later literary origin. Sol, the sun goddess. Vakarine, goddess of the evening star. Vehopades, god of the wind and master of Dausos. Zemina, goddess, the deified soil. Zavigizides, stars. Sol is their mother and sometimes with the moon as their father. One of the most important stars is Osrine. Other stars, Osrine's sisters, are less important, but they sometimes appear in mythic stories too. Especially notable ones are Vakarine or Vakar, Indraha, Selija, Zezdre, and Vavora. Heroes and heroines. Pajauta, the legendary princess of Kernave. Jurit and Kastytis are heroes of a Lithuanian legend, which subsequently became popular, mostly because of its modern poetic interpretation by Myronis. The queen of the Amber Palace Jurit may be considered a manifestation of the goddess of sea in this legend. Local and nature spirits. Ezerines, a spirit of lakes. Javine, a household goddess who protects grain in barns. Giavaras, a household spirit who protects grain. Sacrifices to Giavaras are made after the rye harvest. While cutting grain, women would leave a few grain tufts uncut, which would later be braided into plates. They would also leave some bread and salt under the play, and would say, Devi Mene, Zemel, Duo Dame Ir Tau, a request for the land to continue to be fruitful. Kupol, the spirit of springtime vegetation and flowers. The festival of Kupol was associated with feast of Saint John the Baptist. In this festival, women picked sacral herbs, danced and sang songs. Kupolines is also known as Rasos. Compare this with Zidu Mate in Latvian mythology, Kupala in Polish mythology and Ivan Kupala in Russian mythology. Lauku Divi Azios, spirits, who were running through the fields. When crops in the fields waved in the wind, people saw them as being the actions of spirits. Lauku Divi Azios include Nuogalis, Kiskus, Miska, Lape, Katinas, Bubas, Bubas, Buba, Bobas, Babazis, Bobas, Mamas, Rodingalvis, Rodongerklis, Zaliakis, Papilostakis, Gouda, Dizikas, Smauglis, Ruginus, Popioke, Pipas, Zebras, Arkles, Vilkas. Apines, a spirit of rivers. Various lower beings. Kaukas, spirits similar to leprechauns. Lam, a fairy-like female creature. Described as white and blue as the sky itself. Good spirit, very friendly with the earth and nature gods. However, if anyone tried to use them for personal gain, their punishment would be severe. Nykstukas, gnomes. Velas, spirits of dead human beings. Demonic beings. Aitvaras, a household spirit bringing both good and bad luck. Bobas, an evil spirit with long lean arms, wrinkly fingers and red eyes. He harasses people and tears their hair or stifles them. To children, he is the equivalent of the boogeyman of the English-speaking countries. A misbehaving child could be told by the parents, behave, or Bobas will come and get you. Also, it could be described as a dark or black creature living under the carpet or in some dark spot of the house. Guiltine goddess of death, also the reaper. Other names include Kalinisha, Maras, Maro Murgos, Calera, Pavietra, Capiniu Zamogus. Her sacred bird is the owl. Sometimes she was considered to be a sister of Lema. Ragana, Lithuanian and Latvian word for witch. Slogutis means pain, misery or nightmare. Also can mean fear or bad feelings. Pinchukas or Pinchukas, The word literally means, inhabitant of Pinsk, in Lithuanian. Bronislava Kerbelite, in her work on classification of devilish beings in Lithuanian folklore, remarks that often a stranger was seen as an evil being. On particular, Pinchuks, from Belarus, were seen as strangers. She writes that in one East Lithuanian legend a Pinchukas is portrayed as a mischievous being. The devil Pinchukas was popularized by the novel Baltaragus's Mill by Kazys Baruta, especially when it was turned into the first Soviet rock opera and musical film Devil's Bride. Their Pinchukas is a comic character, lazy, easily deceived, vengeful. Zeberinis, a scary forest spirit that appears as a phosphorescent skeleton. Holy places and things. Dausos or Dangus, the home of good souls. Dausos is on a high mountain, between two rivers. Like the Greek garden of the Hesperides, the garden of Dausos contains trees which bear golden apples. Day in the garden is perpetual, but outside its confines lies perpetual night. Master of Dausos is Vaihopadis or Vahas, who is also one of the oldest gods in Lithuanian mythology. Vahas is identical to Vayu of Hinduism. Austeras and Vaihopadis are the gatekeepers of Dausos. While Austeras acts as the psychopomp of good souls, Vahas blows bad souls into oblivion. Names by written sources. Earliest Rus chronicles. Some names from Lithuanian mythology are also found in Kievan Rus chronicles of the 13th century. These deities were secretly worshipped by King of Lithuania Mindaugas after his baptism. Rus chronicles are considered the best source of information about the ancient Lithuanian pantheon worshipped by nobles and the military. Sovius in 13th century Rus chronicles was a person who introduced the pagan custom of burning bodies after death, according to studies by Gintaras Beresnevičius. Zavorina was a euphemism for the hunting and forest goddess like Roman Diana. Her name is connected with wild animals. There was mentioned in Chronicle that she is a bitch. It means that her zoomorphic shape is female dog. Medeina is another euphemism of the hunting and forest goddess. Medeina also was mentioned in the 16th century by J. Lasicki. She was worshipped by King Mindaugas and represented military interest of warriors. Taliavelis was a powerful smith who made the sun and threw it to the sky. This myth survived in folk tales in the beginning of the 20th century. Some scholars, like K. Buga, tried to prove that Teliavelis is incorrectly written Calvelis. Taliavelis has connections with Finnish Ilmarinen. Andages was mentioned in medieval chronicles as the supreme deity. It may be euphemism for Dievas. It is mentioned in Chronicle that warriors invoke Andages in battle. Nonadivus is an incorrectly written name of the supreme god or just another euphemism. Perkunas was the god of thunder, one of the most powerful deities. Perkunas survived in popular belief and folk tales until the 20th century. Divorix is thought to be one of Perkunas's euphemisms, meaning leader of gods. Martinus Masvidus. Martinus Masvidus in his Latin introduction to Catechismusa Prastitia urged the people to abandon their pagan ways and mentioned the following gods. Perkunas, god of thunder. Laukosargas, god of grains and other agricultural plants. Zempates, god of cattle and other farm animals. Aitvaras and Kaukas, evil spirits. Maciej Strychowski. Maciej Strychowski, Polish-Lithuanian historian and author of Chronicle of Poland, Lithuania, Samogitia and all Russia. In this work, Strychowski provided two lists of gods, one Old Prussian and another Lithuanian. He listed 16 Lithuanian gods. Prokorimas, the supreme deity. Strychowski elaborated that people used to sacrifice white cocks to Prokorimas. Their flesh was divided into 3 pieces. One for peasants, another for pagan priests, and a third for burning. Strychowski pointed out that Prokorimas was similar to the Prussian supreme god Okoprimas. Rugutus, god of fermentation and fermented foods. Zemeninkas, god of land and agriculture. The cult of the Zaltis is associated with the cult of Zemeninkas. Crumine, deity of ears, provider of crops. Lietuvonus, god of rain. Kauriraris, deity of war and war horses. The name etymology is unclear. Vladimir Toporov suggested that it is derived from the Lithuanian word karai, while Wilhelm Manhart argued it stems from karas. Sutvaras, god of all cattle. Simos Dievas, god of family. Apinis Dievas, god of rivers. Bubilas, god of honey and bees. Didas Lotto, the great god. Festivities, songs, and dances in his honor lasted from May 25 to June 25. There are doubts whether this represents an actual god. Gulbis, the good spirit of every human, guardian angel. Ganocles, god of herds and shepherds. Sventpoxtenes, god of all domesticated and wild birds. People did not offer sacrifices to him as he was a free spirit. Kaliudievas, god of roads, trade and travel. Pusitis or Puskitis, deity of land, dwelling in elder bushes and commanding chthonic dwarfs. Jan Lassicki. Jan Lassicki was a Polish Protestant activist. He wrote a treatise on idolatry about the gods of Samogitians, other Sarmatians, and false Christians. This 18-page treatise contained a list of 76 Lithuanian gods with brief description of their functions. Lassicki obtained most of his information from Leszkowski, a Polish lesser noble who worked as a royal land surveyor. The list contained very minor deities, representing everyday household items. Lassicki was also not intimately familiar with Lithuanian culture or language. Therefore, the academic opinion on the list ranges from a valuable resource to a practical joke designed to poke fun of Christian saints through an inverted mirror. Deities mentioned by Jan Lassicki were Oxtihas, a euphemism for the supreme god, derived from the Lithuanian word okstas. Zimpatis, Perkunas, god of thunder. Audros, god of storms. Algus, Osra, the morning star. Her other name was Osrine. Besleia, Brexta, goddess of twilight. Also could be a euphemism for vicar. Ligtius, Datanus. Kerni, local god of cherries. Cremata, god of hogs. Pysius, god of spouses. Medeina, goddess of forest and hunting. Carpisius and Silanitis, gods of forest, mosses and lichens. Tavalas, deity of physical strength. Gintaras Beresnevichus noted that this deity could be the same as medieval Taliavelis. Orthus, Ezerines, spirit or deity of lakes. Derived from Azeras. Sidzius, Simonitis and Ventis Recachonis, spirits worshipped by individual noble families. Carvitis Iratinis, deity of calves and lambs. Gardunitis, protector of newly born lambs. Prigerstitis, can hear whispers. Dorintoyas. Bentus. Laukpatus. Preparsus. Radanisha, god of horses. Valgina, god of cattle. Crixtas, protector of tombstones. Apidame, deity of changed residence. The name is also known from handwritten collection of sermons from 1573. Kriukes, deity of pigs. Lasdona, goddess of hazelnuts. Bubilas, household god of bees, husband of Ostea. Zemina, goddess of land and agriculture. Ostea, household goddess of bees, often presented as wife of Bubilas. Dioetus. Vetustus. Guboy and Tiviverticos. Valiona, goddess of death. Warpulus. Salos, no function recorded by Lassicki. Sluotrazes, no function recorded by Lassicki. The name is derived from Sluota. Tecles, no function recorded by Lassicki. Berzules, no function recorded by Lassicki. Based on etymology, it could be a god of birches and birch sap. Cerisius, no function recorded by Lassicki. The name is possibly derived from Certi. Devargantus, no function recorded by Lassicki. Clamels, no function recorded by Lassicki. Atlabas, no function recorded by Lassicki. Numaeas. Eublanisha, patron of beggars. Dugnai, spirit of flower. Peseas. Trotatoyas Kiberkschu, deity of spark, fire. Alabathus. Pelengabia. Uspaline. Budintoyas. Matergabi. Raugo Zimpatis, deity of sourdough, leaven and fermentation. Lubageldas. Zemenik. Vaisgantas, a god of flax. Gabija, goddess of household fire. Smik per Valina, a phrase rather than a being. Easiagalis, god of death. Aitvaras. Kaukas. Guyvate, black snake. Srudis and Michatel, deities of paint and color. Matthias Praetorius. Deities mentioned by Matthias Praetorius were Latvian mythology. Published by Wikipedia. Latvian mythology is the collection of myths that have emerged throughout the history of Latvia, sometimes being elaborated upon by successive generations, and at other times being rejected and replaced by other explanatory narratives. These myths, for the most part, likely stem from Proto-Indo-European practices and the later folk traditions of the Latvian people in pre-Christian Baltic mythology. Latvian mythology is used particularly as a tool for reconstructing and analyzing the historical pagan beliefs and national identity of Latvia. The minute details of most, if not all of these myths vary from region to region, and sometimes even from family to family. History. 13th–18th century. There are few accounts of Baltic tribes, the ancestors of modern Latvians, and their mythology prior to their Christianization in the 13th century. Following Christianization, a variety of sources of information concerning indigenous mythology become available, including chronicles, travel reports, visitation records, Jesuit reports and other accounts of pagan practices. These sources are considered secondary by researchers because, since the authors were not Latvian, they did not speak the local languages and were often biased. These materials can be unreliable, containing errors, distortions and even outright fabrications, these stemming from the Christian worldview of their creators. This said, data derived from early accounts can often be substantiated by judicious comparisons made with motifs and themes present in folklore collected in successive centuries. 18th, early 20th century. Most folklore materials have been collected since the mid-19th century. In the 18th and 19th centuries, it was assumed that Baltic tribes were originally one nation and thus had the same deities. Early authors tried to reconstruct a Latvian pantheon using data from neighboring regions. This trend was later also adopted by Latvian national romanticists. After the abolition of serfdom, a new national identity was forming and authors sought to prove that Baltic cultural traditions were as deep as those of other nations. It was hoped that a grand epic could be constructed using pieces preserved in folklore. It was also thought that the ancient religion, forgotten during 700 years of oppression, could be reconstructed. However, folklore sources proved insufficient for the task. Some attempted to reconstruct pantheons to be as impressive as that of Greek mythology, which led to some deities being simply invented. Besides the assumption that deities of other Baltic peoples must be Latvian as well but were simply lost over time, many new deities were modeled after Greek and Roman deities. An example of the trend is the epic poem Lakplēsis by Andrejs Pumpurs, which features a pantheon of Latvian and Prussian gods and some the author has invented himself. Similarly, works of Juris Ilunins and poet Michaelis Krogzemis feature pantheons of invented deities. At the same time, some pagan rites were still practiced. And, as Christianity was seen as alien, attempts were made to recreate the ancient religion. The most successful of the neo-pagan movements was Dievtori, established in the late 1920s, which claims that ancient Latvians were monotheistic and the various mythological beings are all aspects of one god. While the notion of needing to remove alien influences to reconstruct Latvian traditions was preserved into later times, the attempts to create concepts. Celestial deities. There are various reconstructions of Latvian mythical space, but most researchers agree on the meaning of certain features related to the sky. The sky itself is identified as debeskalns. The sky is also referred to as Olu kalns, Sudraba kalns or Ledus kalns, with the adjectives, probably referring to stars or snow. It has also been suggested that Dievs is also a symbol of the sky because the etymology of his name seems to be related to the sky. Dievs is considered to be the supreme deity. Another celestial deity is the goddess of the sun, Sol, whose name literally translates to the sun. She ensured the fertility of the earth and was the guardian of the unlucky, especially for orphans and young shepherds. Her path leads her across the mountain of sky to the sea, which is sometimes interpreted as a symbolic representation of the sky or cosmic ocean. The sea and other bodies of water, including rivers, especially Daugava, seem to mark the boundary between worlds of the living and the dead. In Latvian, the word for the world is derived from the word for the sun, and these worlds are referred to as this sun and that sun. Therefore, it seems that Sol is also closely related to the concept of death. She apparently carries the souls of the dead across the sea to the world of the dead. Her daily movement can thus be related to the cycle of human life, with her being reborn every day. On the path of the sun, in or by the water, often on an island or rock in middle of the seas, is the Ostras coax, thought to represent world tree or axis mundi. It is usually described as a tree, but can also be variety of other plants or even objects. Nobody has ever seen the tree, although folklore purports that many have searched all their lives. Still, it has been suggested that its natural counterpart might be the polar star or the Milky Way. It has also been proposed it might be a symbol for the year. The tree is related to celestial wedding mythos, in which son or her daughter is courted by Dieva Deli, Ossiclus or Percons. Also, as in Latvian the word for daughter also stands for maiden, it is uncertain who exactly is getting married. However, this does not affect how mythical events transpire. The male deities spy on the solar deity at the world tree, prepare a bath for her, tease her and so on. Eventually, she is abducted and wed. Sol's husband is the moon god Menes. Percons strikes the world tree, has weeping Sol pick up bits for 3 years and then reassembles them, finishing with the very tip, on the 4th year. Afterlife. The world of the dead is called Isale or Vinsol. It is related to various mother deities. Zeem's mate, sometimes referred to as knave, literally meaning death, Valu mate, Kapu mate, and Smilsu mate. Zeem's mate is portrayed as wearing a long robe in all white and occasionally has a scythe or sickle. Jods, the equivalent to Satan, is a being usually portrayed as being on par with other deities. Unlike Velni, Jods is purely evil. He is said to have taken part in the creation of the world and living things. Jods steals people away to take them to his world. In this he is similar to other spirits who kill people, including Veli, who were believed to sometimes come back to claim a life of a person they knew in their lifetime. The dead, called Veli, were considered to be visiting their old homes during autumn from Mycli to Martini. A Jesuit report from the end of 16th century suggests that historically a funeral procession was led by a person waving the axe to protect the deceased from Veli coming to him too fast. The deceased was buried with items of trade to be able to secure livelihood in the afterlife. Bread and beer was also given. In autumn the souls were invited back home for a feast. The house would be clean and a table with food set. At the beginning of the feast, an elder would invite Veli by calling the names of all the dead who once lived in the house the living could remember. He would then give a speech scolding them for not having protected the house well enough, ask them to do better next year and then invite them to eat. After the meal was done, Veli would be chased out and the house would be carefully cleaned to ensure no one had stayed behind, and the dirt would be thrown in water. Veli could also be invited to chase themselves in the bathhouse. The food could also be brought to the graveyard or left in the bathhouse, barn or granary. In that case, it would be checked next morning to see if Veli had touched it, to figure out if they were benevolent to the living. In this case, a candle would be lit so the dead could see the food. In some regions, pails of milk and water along with a clean towel would also be left so Veli could wash themselves. Those who did not honor Veli were said to have a poor harvest. In modern Latvia, a form of ancestor worship has been preserved in celebrating the Remembrance Day of the Dead in late November and in graveyard days, which are held in late summer, and the precise dates of which are decided by whoever owns or manages a particular graveyard. During this day or sometimes days, people come to clean up the graves of the deceased of their family. Demons. The belief that all sorcerers and witches are evil only came into being after Christianization. Before, it was believed that, like everyone, sorcerers could be both evil and good. After Christianization, it was believed that sorcerers were servants of evil called Bervji, Bertni X and Raganas Mary Velni. These might, in reality, have been folk medicine practitioners. Laumas and spiganas, terms speculated to originally refer to different notions, were also used to refer to witches in some areas. With the help of Jods, they could turn into various beings or have evil spirits serve them. Thus the demons could variously be thought to be independent spirits or spirits of sorcerers flying around. It was thought that souls of sorcerers leave their bodies, which become dead and can then be permanently killed by turning it, as the soul does not know how to return into the body. There are also reports of werewolves, humans who could turn into wolves. The turning was usually accidental, as it happened when someone stood between two pines which had grown together at a certain time. This time varied depending on the region. There are conflicting reports on what forces they serve, though they usually serve no one and are just beasts. Witches are often reported to steal milk either by themselves or by employing toads and snakes, believed to be capable of sucking it from a cow's udder and then regurgitating it on command. Another beast sometimes said to be in a sorcerer's service or even a sorcerer's pet was Pukis, a being who would steal grain and other riches and bring them to its owner. It would be kept in a separate room that nobody could enter without the owner's permission. Dragons would be fed the first bit of every meal. If a dragon felt that it was not revered enough, it would turn on the owner and burn the house down. Sometimes dragons could speak. A demon, sometimes related to sorcerers but usually said to be the soul of a child condemned to haunt until the time he or she ought to have died, is Leotuvans, who tortures people, cattle, and horses during the night and who is associated with sleep paralysis. Similarly, it is sometimes reported that Vedatus is a ghost, sometimes of a prematurely deceased person and sometimes seeking to kill a person in ways similar to his own death. Often, however, Vedatus is a devil himself. This demon attacks travelers, making them confused and unable to find their way. Often its aim seems to be to lead people to the nearest body of water, where they would drown. Velns are beings whose young are portrayed as roughly half the size of a human. The young Velni are not physically powerful, but are still mischievous and sometimes even stupid. All Velni have black fur and occasionally horns on their head. Grown Velni are strong and occasionally have multiple heads. This is best portrayed in the famous fairy tale, Kerbads. All Velni are greedy. They live in Pekal, or later referred to as El. To get to Pekal you have to find a very deep hole, usually in caves, swamps, or the roots of a large tree, as Pekal is not another realm, but simply a place beneath the surface of the earth. Sumpurni are beings that are taller than a human and live in forests. Their most distinguishing feature is having the body of a human covered in fur and the head of a dog or sometimes bird. Sumpurni also have a tail. It was believed that they had a hierarchical society with nobles and even kings. The length of one's tail would determine his position in their society. When in a state of rage, Sumpurni would attack humans and other animals and tear them apart and suck their blood. The order of this is sometimes reversed. Fate goddesses. The most important goddess of fate is Lema. She lives on Earth and is closely involved in human life. Her basic function is related to childbirth and deciding a child's fate. Traditionally, women would give birth in bathhouses. The path leading to a bathhouse would be cleansed so Lema could easily make her way to help in the birthing process. The woman would be ritually cleansed and would offer prayers and give ritual offerings to Lema. After a successful birth, married women would feast, with Lema being reserved a place of honor in the bathhouse as sign of gratitude. She would also determine a person's fate, a decision even she herself could not alter afterward. She was expected to help in other important aspects of life as well and cared for well-being of the people in general. Unmarried girls would pray to her to give them good husbands and happy marriage. She also ensured the fertility of fields and animals to some extent. Another goddess, Mara, also has several functions in common with Lema. Although this view has been criticized, many researchers agree that Mara is synonymous with Saint Mary. It has been suggested that Mary took over some functions of earlier deities, including Lema. However, Mara was used to refer to Saint Mary, who was also called upon during childbirth and to help with a number of ailments by either her modern Latvian name Maria or number of Christian euphemisms. All these were also used as euphemisms to refer to uterus in folk magic. The opposing view, based on comparative linguistics linking her with a wide range of other Indo-European deities, is that she was an important pre-Christian chthonic deity that both gives and takes life. Other two goddesses with similar functions are Karta and Dekla. Dekla is mainly mentioned in folklore from a single Catholic area of Courland, historically the district of Pilton. Karta is even more rarely mentioned in folklore. She is thought to execute the decisions Lema and Dekla make, as suggested by her name. She is always alongside Lema and may likely a historically recent occurrence that has more to do with phonesthetics of folk songs than religion. Fertility gods. Ensuring fertility was an important function that was assigned to a number of spirits and deities. Ensuring a good harvest was the primary function of Jumis. It was thought that he lives in the fields, therefore the last of the crop would be left on the field for Jumis to live in. This belief was the basis of a ritual involving the catching of jumis, performed on Myklį, which usually was the last day of harvest. This seems to have involved singing songs as the last of the grain was reaped, asking jumis to run to wherever the crop was stored. The last bit of the crop would be searched for jumis and then tied into a knot. Another related practice was to make wreaths of grain cereals that would be kept until next year when the seeds from them would be sown first. It was usually attempted to place jumis stalks in these wreaths. In this sense, jumis is symbolized by stalks with 2 ears. Any fruit or flower showing such abnormal duplication was called jumis. It was believed that eating jumis would cause women or female animals to give birth to twins. Ensuring the well-being of livestock was, however, a function of other gods. Usans was associated with the Usini celebration and thus somewhat merged with St. George. He was worshipped mainly as the guardian of horses. It is also thought he might have been the god of bees and the god of light. The main protector of cows seems to have been Mara. She is also known as Lopu Maria, Lopu Mate and Piena Mate. Her function was to ensure that cows give milk. Therefore, she is also often mentioned in connection with water, rivers and sea, as water symbolized milk, while clay symbolized butter. Historical sources also mention that Latvian pagans would venerate snakes and toads as milk mother and feed them with milk. Other practices. There may have been a number of other spirits and deities venerated by Latvians. There is, for example, a wide range of deities referred to as Mot. Their number is variously estimated to be anywhere from 50 to 115. The reasons for such unclarity are that sometimes the authenticity of certain mothers is questioned. There are differences between regions in what deities are worshipped, and also many of these are synonymous titles of a single deity. Mother and other kinship terms can be used merely to signify age and also to show respect. While most female spirits are called mothers, male spirits would be called father, or master, or god, or spirit. Historical sources report that there was a belief that spirits live in the ground. There also are Mahas Gari or Mahas Kungs, who lived and were worshipped at home. These sometimes were sacred animals. They were often fed a first bit of every food. Spirits and deities were also worshipped in designated places, which could be visited only at certain times of year. It was believed that visiting them at other times or defiling, even unknowingly, such a site in any way would bring great misfortune to the guilty party. Blindness or death are common examples. There were also animals, some known as Dieva Sunisi, whose killing would bring misfortune. These include stoats, wolf, frogs, ladybirds, etc. Sometimes, however, it was believed that killing would not bring misfortune, but that if the animal got away, it would carry out horrific revenge. This mostly refers to snakes. It was also believed that saying the name of an animal such as a wolf or snake would cause them to appear. There are similar beliefs about not. Somewhat related is the idea that whistling in certain places would invite the devil, while singing would invite God. Therefore, a large variety of euphemisms were used instead, including comparisons, human names, and other anthropomorphic terms. E.g., snakes were likened to ropes or called brides, while the wolf was named Juris or Ansis or referred to as man of the forest. Prussian mythology. Published by Wikipedia. Prussian mythology is the account of what is known of the polytheistic religion of the Old Prussians, indigenous peoples of Prussia before the Prussian crusade waged by the Teutonic Knights. This archaic Indo-European religion was closely related to other Baltic faiths, namely those of the Lithuanians and Latvians. Its myths and legends did not survive because the Old Prussian people became Germanized and their culture became extinct in the early 18th century. Fragmentary information on gods and rituals can be found in various medieval chronicles, but most of this is unreliable. No sources document pagan religion before the forced Christianization in the 13th century. Most of what is known about Prussian religion has been recovered from dubious 16th century sources. Historical background and sources. The Teutonic Order, a crusading military order, began the Prussian Crusade in the 1220s. Their goal was to conquer and convert pagan Prussians to Christianity. The knights built log and stone fortresses, which proved to be impregnable to the Prussians. Despite 5 Prussian uprisings, the conquest of Prussia was complete by the 1280s. German, Lithuanian, Latvian, and Polish colonists repopulated the decimated region. It is estimated that by around the year 1400 the Prussians numbered 100,000 and comprised only about half the total population of Prussia. The Prussians were subject to Germanization and assimilation and eventually became extinct sometime after the 16th century. The Knights regarded paganism as evil and therefore unworthy of study, deserving, in their eyes, only complete eradication. For this reason they showed no interest in local customs and produced no detailed Prussian pantheon. Early lists. The 1249 Treaty of Christburg mentioned Kirk, an idol worship during harvest festivals. Scholars were unable to positively determine its gender, function, or etymology. Various suggested functions include god of food, smithing god, god creator, god of harvest and grain, evil spirit, god of fire. Some even doubted whether it was a god at all and suggested that it was a name given to a corn dolly. Another reliable source is a 1418 memorandum written by Bishop of Warmia to Pope Martin V. The letter reminded the Pope about the Teutonic achievements in Christianizing Prussians, who no longer worship Patola and Ntrimp. Most scholars interpret this as two different gods, but Patola could also be an adjective to describe Ntrimp. Based on later works, Patola is usually identified as Pekels, angry god of the underworld, and Ntrimp as Patrimpo, god of seas or grain. In addition to the trinity of Pekels, Patrimpo, and Perkunas, Grunau mentioned three minor gods, where Shetu or Borsketu and Schwebroto were personifications of Widwuto and Bruteno, and Kercho was god of food. Pseudovian Book and Constitutiones Synodales. Constitutiones lists 10 Prussian deities and also provides their classical Roman equivalents. Note that none of these are goddesses and furthermore that Kirk is missing from the list. This list is closely mirrored in the Pseudovian Book. Suextix. Suextix is described as a god of light in historical sources, or a god of stars. His name has been proposed to be cognate to the word for star in Slavic languages, reconstructed as asterisk zvezda. He also appears to be connected to words for star in Baltic languages, Lith Zavajda and Latv Zavigans. The deity's name seems to contain a Prussian stem Swaist, present in Swaist and in verb Schwegstenei. On the other hand, still aligned with the interpretation as god of light, Roman Zaroff postulates that Suextix might have been a solar deity, basing his contention on ethnographical and folkloric data from the other Baltic languages. Paganism. Content. The book included a list of Prussian gods, sorted in a generally descending order from sky to earth to underworld: Ocapermus, Swastix, Auschouts, Otrimpus, Patrimpus, Bardoites, Pergrubrius, Pilnitis, Parkins, Pekels, Pockels, Pushgates and his servants Barstuk and Markopel. The book also discussed in detail traditional weddings, funerals, and honoring of the dead. In particular, the book described a ritual sacrifice of a goat by a priest in great detail.